As a reminder, this is an educational and grassroots program designed to restoring our constitutional republic. Many parts of this show will refer to previous shows, and all of these shows are kind of dovetailed with each other. That said, you need to listen to all of these shows so that you can garner what Republic Review is and how we can reclaim the Republic. I've mentioned previously that I have an executive summary on Facebook on the Mobius Strip Press page of Facebook. That's Mobius Strip Press. I know that's a mouthful, and saying all of these difficult vocabulary words that the framers used back in their time is always tongue twisting, and so it's always difficult to try to say these things right. But anyway, Mobius Strip Press page on Facebook is where you'll find my executive summary. I believe it's also paramount at this point in time to kind of address this ground movement, or this stupid idea that's growing legs regarding the constitutional challenge that's playing out from this past election. And many people are or have been challenging the wisdom in the Electoral College. First, we have to look at the big picture that we are a republic and a Republican form of government, not a democracy. And the wisdom of the framers in inserting the Electoral College and inserting a guaranteed Republican form government within the Constitution was incredibly wise. What this does, and as a matter of fact, Delaware clearly stated at the very beginning of the Constitutional Convention the reason that they didn't want an apportionment to population, because they were a small state. And they came right out and said, we don't trust you bigger states. We think that you're just going to gobble us up and just deny us of our own self-interests. Anyway, what does this mean, and who said what are and what is a Republican form of government? As I just said, it's the Constitution. The Constitution dictates and guarantees that the states would be Republican in form. It states in Article 4, Section 4, and I quote, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government." Now, this itself can feed a very long series of shows, because this is one element of the Constitution that is not being abided by. Almost all the states in this union are abiding by democracy and democracy rules. In other words, 50 plus 1 is what drives change within a state. And what that does is it nullifies and cancels the disparate parts of a state, such as Eastern Washington from Western Washington, and it allows Eastern Washington, or actually Western Washington, to basically do runsack and run over all the rest of the other counties and congressional districts, instead of recognizing that we have our own voice in Republican form of government. That means it's representative. The framers knew the dangers of democracies, and they knew the ebb and flow and the tossing to and fro of democracies, that there were two extreme ends of a democracy. There was anarchy on one end, and on the other end there was democracy, or not democracy, despotism, another D word. So from anarchy to despotism, they saw nations and societies really get tossed to and fro from these upheavals. The most stable government was a distributive sovereignty and a republican. And as a matter of fact, during the Continental Congress, during the Declaration of Independence, and right at that point in time, John Adams wrote a very long dissertation called A Republic, and that was basically establishing what I think was a common conception, but he documented why we wanted to have a republic instead of a democracy. Again, this distributive sovereignty is something I spoke of before when I contrasted centrifugal to centripetal political energies. Remember, the centrifugal is outward flowing, and centripetal political energies are inward flowing. And if you look at a republic, and or you look at representative government, or if you just kind of put it into concept of marriage and how a husband and wife are driving a car. Well, they both can't be driving the car. Somebody has to, actually put their hands on the wheel and control the pedals. You can't share that responsibility and safely drive that vehicle. So you have to basically delegate to one person the responsibility of operating the car and another person the responsibility of navigating. And well, we got to stop. We need to get this. We need a bathroom break for the kids. If you look at a government in democracies, you basically are letting everybody drive that car, and so will hit the brakes. And actually, one of the things that the framers recognized in democracies or in monarchies and so forth, they're either one extreme or the other. And so one of the things that tended to happen, and as a matter of fact, a classic example of that was the French Revolution, was as soon as there was no food to eat, the people, made that the number one priority. And yeah, you've got to eat, but they become very reactionary. And so you start chasing the problem of the day with democracies, where with the Republican form of government, it's hard to change and it takes a lot of effort to change. And they knew this, and they knew that it would make it impossible or very hard to upset the general government and the course that they were supposed to take in outward facing in their limited and defined government. It's a little bit more complicated than that, than just driving a car or two people. The government has lots of different facing directions and or focuses. So if you looked at the complexity of driving a large battleship and all of the things that make that thing float, the commander of the ship may have the ultimate say, but he delegates power down to the engine room, to the electronics and so forth, so that these other subcomponents to this ship can make independent decisions to meet the overall needs of where they need to go and how they need to get their refueling and those types of things. Because you're not literally driving every facet of that ship from one control post or one control system. There are many facets of that. So these two metaphors, I think, kind of help give you an idea of what our Republican form of government is, that there were distributive and representative in form. The ship driving requires trust and leadership. That's the same with the car, and that's the same with government. A tenet in leadership is similar to our constitutional framework, and that is delegating authority. In creating this general government, these states and these independent sovereign nations, these 13 states and now 50 states, have to put trust in each other and have to put trust in the general government that it's going to comply to its constitution. Ultimately, in government, their job is to fulfill their oath of office, and this means that they are supposed to protect and defend the Constitution, not discard it for political expediency, to pay off their constituents or their lobbyists. So their focus should be doing their job and fulfilling their oath and staying within the confines of the Constitution. And again, we constantly see that these guys are discarding what they should be doing for political expediency, or they're trying to pay off, like I said, constituents or lobbyists. Consequently, in a Republican form of government, it is a representative form where we delegate and empower our representatives to do our will. In the state, we have representatives that basically represent us in the state legislature as well as in the state Senate. These are the people that we've given the ability to create laws. We're not the ones that are supposed to do that. It's not the only democracy that's involved is the selecting of our representatives. The same principle applies to Electoral College. These Electoral College votes originally which actually is established in Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, where they vote for two candidates, and that was back at the very beginning. This resulted in a long political fight in 1800 when Jefferson and Adams were running, and it actually drove towards a change to the Constitution, which gave us the 12th Amendment. But the Electoral College, these guys nowadays are supposed to represent us. These electors, and the way they break it down by state is they're allocated to the state by representatives in Congress. In other words, we have representatives within the House, and then we have two representatives for the state in the Senate. So in the state of Washington, because we have 10 congressional districts, we get 10 electors for the congressional districts, and we get 2 electors for the Senate. So that's why we have 12 electoral college seats.